Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to retort to the question of whether or not Mary died at the end of her life. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. O most compassionate Virgin Mary, never was it known that anyone who fled your protection, implored your assistance, or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this, we fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, our Mother. To you we sit, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, not despising our intentions, but with thy clemency, hear and answer it. Amen. That is appropriate to do a Mary prayer, given that we're doing Mary. And I'm so used to doing Latin, I sometimes stumble on the English version. All right, so we do have episodes on Mariology. We have an episode here, I'll put them in the banners, for misunderstandings of Mariology. We have a 2-part series on the 4 Marian dogmas, so the Immaculate Conception, Assumption, and so forth. And this is covered a little in there, but I wanted to do a tight little 5-minute episode on this. So, did Mary die at the end of her life? It depends. The Eastern rites, so this would be like the Maronites and the Byzantine rites and the guys from the East. And you remember, the Catholic Church has different rites, there's like 22, 23. But the Eastern Orthodox and the Eastern Catholic rites, who still hold allegiance to the Pope, believe that she in fact did die. They believe in the dormition, or she at least fell asleep, like a dormitory dorm or duermo, asleep. That it's more of a belief over there that she did either was asleep or she died, and then she was assumed body and soul by the power of God, not by her own power, because she's not a goddess. Okay, it's through her own power, just like her Immaculate Conception was not through some magic she had as a goddess, it's the power of God. In the Latin rite, which is the predominant rite of the Catholic Church in the world, we believe she, or I should say the tradition is more that she was assumed body and soul. And depending, and again, there's no necessary dogma on whether or not she was asleep, dead, or alive. You don't need to necessarily pick one. These are just traditions, small traditions. What you do need to believe as a Catholic are the 4 Marian dogmas, and one of them is you must believe in the Assumption of Mary. This was always believed throughout church history, and it wasn't formally dogmatized until really Pope Pius XII, like in 1956, 57. He died in 58, so it must have been mid-50s. But he decided just to formally dogmatize it. But you must believe that she was assumed into body and soul and into heaven. But whether she was asleep or not really doesn't matter. Now, I mean, there are some theories, there is some small traditions about the apostles all being around her when she did assume into heaven. That is a small tradition. Again, it's not what you have to believe, but all the living apostles, I should say, at the time were all there when it happened. We do know that she did live with John, the evangelist, the writer of the epistles of John, the Gospel of John, and the book of Revelation. In Ephesus, their house, you can still go visit that there in Ephesus. Whether or not she assumed there or she assumed to Jerusalem, again, nobody really knows. And then there's the belief, like, did Mary die? Now, on one argument is no, because she did not have original sin. And one of the punishments of original sin was death. So Adam and Eve, for example, had they not turned their back on God and disobeyed him, they would not have died. I mean, this has been the theological view for centuries. And so Mary didn't have death, didn't have the stain of death, so she would not have died. So that's why kind of the Latin rite has this view of whenever it was God's will, God's time to have her come to heaven, she just assumed. You see very famous painters throughout history have painted the Assumption of Mary, and it's typically with the apostles around, and you see her going into heaven. Now, there are some theologians who believe that Mary chose to die. If some of you ever do the Rosary of the 7 Sorrows of Mary, she did have a very sad life, and she wanted to experience death. She wanted to experience the sorrow of death, to be closer to her son and so forth. So there is a belief that she chose death, and that's one of the reasons that how the Eastern side of the church has always believed that she did die, and then she was assumed that way. In closing, it really ultimately doesn't matter. So if you're ever asked the question, and probably Protestants, you're probably going to get more questions of Why do you worship Mary as a goddess? Why do you believe in her immaculate conception? Why don't you think she had more kids? And we have an episode on that too, what Mary had, how we know Mary didn't have more biological kids. You're probably going to get more questions of that. But if you get questions from fellow Catholics or from anybody, did Mary die? We're like, we really don't know. All we need to believe as Catholics is that she is in the assumption that she was assumed. The Eastern Church views it as more she was asleep or she was dead before she assumed. The Latin Rite, which is the predominant rite of the world of the Catholic Church, believes that she was assumed, not dead. Just like right now, me going up into heaven, right? She was awake. And that's pretty much it. So guys, post in the comments, let me know. Do you ever do the Memorare, the prayer that I just did? Do you do the Rosary? What's your view of this whole topic? Please hit the notification, subscribe, and share button and share with others. Until next time, take care, God bless, and pray.